What is up, guys? We are live today at Sound Base with Elliot Dyson Designs and Justin from Justin DIY Audio. You know what? I always forget his name. I'm just kidding. Oh, man. We're
Uh,
super excited to have you guys on today. We have a great program about. What are we going to be talking about, Elliot? Why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about today?
we're going to be talking about the new speaker Nick and I have designed, the Rule Breaker, and talking about dispersion and why you need to care about it. So much stuff.
So when we talk about that, today's episode isn't going to be just on the rule breaker. It's why did we design the rule breaker the way we did? Because we think that it can revolutionize the way that you can listen to music in general, and how can you do that? Even scaling it up, like how can you do it with like a larger scale, etc. Does
Exactly.
that sound right? All
Perfect.
right,
Yeah, I'm
Justin.
really interested in scaling it up. That's what I'm curious about because it looks like a relatively small speaker, but I want to see a big one. I like big speakers.
It's like
You say
it
that,
is.
Justin, but
It's the size of
even
your
though
head.
it's quite small, it's still got a decent sensitivity. So you're still going to get plenty of volume out of it. I mean, I think the driver
There it
is
is.
rated at 84 dB sensitive for
Okay.
1 watt at 1 meter. And that's a safe sensitivity rating, really.
And I did
Pretty
want
much
to take
like
the opportunity to talk a little about laser cutters. That's a pretty brutal laser that you use, Nick, if it can cut through half-inch hardwood. And I always like to say hi to the guys in the chat as we get started. I see some familiar names. Bass That Hurts, Mullen is here, Bobby Burkett is here, RGA is here. We got the usual crowd here. Good to see everybody. David K is here. Let's see. Someone mentioned D's nuts. There's always someone talking about D's nuts in the chat. The True Voice of Reason is here. Good to see everybody. Glad you all made the time to come listen to us talk to each other about audio.
Absolutely. Yep. We are super excited. Now, so today we're going to be talking a lot about these. So let's go ahead and first talk about this particular design, right? Oh, actually, we got our first super chat. So let's go ahead and do that. Can you wish my friend a happy birthday? Justin, you want to wish him a happy birthday?
Hey, Mike, happy birthday. That's Mike Hunt. Happy birthday.
How about you,
happy
Elliot?
birthday, Mike.
What about his full name? Come on, his full name.
Happy birthday, Mike Hunt.
We've just been Simpsoned. Oh, jeez. Elliot still hasn't got it yet. Don't worry. When you
Oh
translate
my
it to
goodness
English, you'll
me.
get it.
Why am I supposed to, Luckily, I took a breath between those two names. Oh,
I tried to
jeez.
draw it out as much as possible. We want to keep the show family safe and keep us from getting demonetized on YouTube.
Well, that's just someone's name. It's just someone's name. We can't help that it sounds interesting. Well, we'll keep that on until another super chat comes on. All right, so let's go ahead and talk first of all how we came across this. So me and Elliot, I want to start this off like this. So Elliot has been talking about BMR speakers for the longest time with me. BMR. And you love BMRs, right? There's one. Justin has. Is that a 3-inch, Justin? Three and a half.
3.5.
Three and a half.
yeah, that's I think their largest one.
I think so.
Thanks.
That's what she said.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about BMR? Because when we did the rule breaker, we chose a BMR, and we chose this for a specific reason. But I'll let Elliot tell you about that.
Right. So even for its price, it's got like amazing dispersion. Even punches well above its price category, really. And the way it works essentially is have you seen any of those really large panels of like extruded polystyrene, and they stick a bunch of exciters
Yeah.
on in the right places?
Yeah, I've made one.
And
Yeah, it
and I think
uses that same principle, but they actually do the mathematics behind it to control the high frequency dispersion. You know how your speaker cones, when they're large enough, they start to get breakup in those high frequencies. They're actually controlling how that happens, so they can get a nice frequency response in that high frequency region, on axis as well as off axis. And through that, you get a really, really wide off-axis response. And then they've essentially made it into a normal driver where it also moves forward and backwards with your normal like surround and spider and everything, so that you can get plenty low as well. So you can
So
use it as a full range.
let me go ahead and break this down a little bit for those that don't understand that technology yet, or terminology, I should say. No, that's okay. Dispersion, we're talking about dispersion. What we're talking about is the pattern of going off axis, so left and right of the speaker. Typical driver depends on the size of the driver, and as the size of the driver gets smaller, you get better off-axis dispersion. So the larger the driver, the less of an off-axis you get, to the extent of what we call beaming. Eventually, every driver has a beaming property that determines the size of the speaker would determine that, minus a BMR. BMR has changed the way that occurs by using... we got a new super chat. Thank you, David K. That was worth it. So cool. And don't forget to hit the like button. And thank you, David K. Man, $50. That is awesome. I hope that this is worth every penny. And so for a BMR, they've actually changed those properties. So if you've seen the video, which I think is like the world's best DIY speaker or something like that, it's like one of the most popular DIY speaker videos on YouTube. It's got like well over 1 million views. That's what you're talking about. It uses what we call a tactile transducer, right?
Or an
Audio
exciter.
exciters, like tactile
An exciter.
transducers, they're ones that are designed specifically for low frequencies. But yeah, they use the same stuff.
And the
So an
technical
exciter.
name what we're
Gotcha.
talking about is a DML, a distributed mode loudspeaker. Is that correct? Have I got the jargon right? I've built one before. I built one before I started my channel. If you look at my earlier videos, you can see them in the background. They look like two big black pieces of foam. I just dyed them black, and they sounded really good for just taking a voice coil with some adhesive and sticking it to a piece of styrofoam. And I would encourage anybody who wants to try building a speaker to build one of those. Just go to Parts Express. Someone mentioned the butt kicker, same general concept. Just go to Parts Express, order one of these exciters, and you just buy a piece of foam from Home Depot and just stick it on there. There's some science behind it. Don't stick it right in the middle, stick it kind of offset a little bit. And it gets a really wide dispersion. I mean, no matter where you are in the room, especially with a big 2-foot by 2-foot panel, you get a very full sound. They don't do very well for bass, mostly because whatever you're leaning them up against is going to cause them to vibrate. But for something so simple as just sticking an exciter to a piece of foam, it's a lot of fun. I should make a video on one of those, but someone already made a video and got 1 million views, so it feels redundant.
Now, Elliot, you had explained though they do a little bit differently here, because they actually, if I understand it correctly, they have changed the modes like somewhere in here where they actually does low frequency and high frequency, and so the way that this works, and I'm not real familiar with the BMR technology though, is that we can get a really low crossover point where something like a typical exciter, we probably wouldn't get that type of crossover point. Elliot?
Well, compared to a typical tweeter, no.
Yes.
Well, compared to a typical
kind
tweeter,
of.
definitely.
So, essentially, you know that DML technology, that works down to a certain frequency range. And then from that point on, normal speaker technology continues onwards, where you've got just the basic driver moving back and forth. And that's where you're getting the low frequency from. Hey, Andy.
Andy, thank you so much. Living Loud with Andy. Rain has been called for. Keep it up. Can't keep up with Dave, but like he said, smash that like button. What's up, Nick, Justin, Elliot? Hey, man, not much here. What is going on with you, Andy? We appreciate it. Thank you so much for the super chat, man.
But yeah,
Justin doesn't care about the super chat, I guess. So
I'm here. I'm just chilling in the chats. I appreciate every super chat that we get, no matter the size.
oh, absolutely.
What I always say is those super chats let us know that we're doing the right thing, that we're being entertaining and useful and providing information for you. So the BMR, above a certain frequency, it acts like a DML. Below that, it acts like a regular piston driver.
Exactly.
And that's
Correct.
going to
Yep,
allow
exactly.
you to get a lot lower crossover point than you would get with a traditional tweeter. How well do BMRs do with the high frequencies?
Well,
especially
it
off
depends.
axis.
Yes. So honestly, it depends on the implementation. So in engineering, we run simulations, and what they will have done is run simulations on where to put the masses and everything like that. So there are certain drivers that they produce that are better than others. It's actually how we chose that specific one that we've got in the rule breaker, because it has better off-axis and off-axis properties than most of their other BMRs that they have, while still having good sensitivity. That's why we chose that. But the benefit is they can design it for that specific aspect. And with the BMR that we used, its off-axis response is nearly out to 180 degrees. So, like, imagine that's on axis. It's almost all the way out to the sides of the speaker.
So
And we
you've
actually
got
show
good frequency response, no matter if you're dead in front of the speaker or you're off beside it.
So let's kind of talk about. So we kind of mentioned like what a BMR does, the off axis, but I feel like we've skipped over probably what the most important thing is, and that's why do we even care? So a typical MTM is designed like this, and Justin and Elliot, you guys know why it's designed. So a typical MTM is not designed this way. This is what most center channel speakers look like. Okay, they're designed like this, but they're designed incorrectly. And we're going to go over that in a second, because MTMs are actually designed to be stood up this way. And there's a reason for it. And most of it has to do with time alignment, which has to do with off-axis and deconstructive waves and things of that nature. But we're going to let Elliot and Justin describe what we're talking about here. So why is an MTM? Why is this an MTM supposed to sit like this? And why? And how can we fix the problem by moving it this way? Or what are the issues, first of all, I guess, with putting it that way?
Well, the main reason why, and you mentioned this in your video, Nick, why we sit them down kind of horizontally, the other way horizontally, is because that's what looks good aesthetically and we think it should do inside the room. So that is done just simply so that your wife likes the way it looks sitting on top of the whatever in front of the television.
Well, and it fits on your furniture too. It fits well.
Right. Yeah. And so it looks less weird sitting like that. That's the way it looks like it should go. But it's not for a very deep technical reason that Elliot is going to describe.
Sure. So at a high enough frequency, the distance between those two mid-range drivers beside each other, they're going to start interfering. And then we get something called lobing. And what starts to happen is as you move off axis side to side, is you're getting constructive and destructive interference. What that means is that as the two drivers interact, your frequency response is going to dip and then bump up and dip and bump up as you move from left to right. Now, if it was in a vertical position, that would just be happening as you're moving up and down. And of course, people aren't generally sat at different heights, so that doesn't make as much of a difference. But in a center channel, it's laid
So
flat.
I've got a question real quick before we go on. Is that the same thing as comb filtering?
Yes.
What you're describing?
Lobing is when it happens around the crossover. Comb filtering is when it's happening throughout the whole frequency range.
And so does the normal flat layout, horizontal layout for a center channel speaker, is it both going to have lobing and comb filtering? Because comb filtering, I know you get that when you have, you see it in car audio a lot. You see two big mid-bass drivers in the door side by side. It looks nice. It's loud, but you're going to have comb filtering.
Yeah, you're going to get both. Depending on how high that crossover is, you're probably going to get both.
Unfortunately, the car, they're down low in the door, and so it's probably not the same effect. But go ahead, Nick.
So let's explain why this is happening. Both of these mid-ranges are wired in a way that they act as one driver, okay? So it's acting as one particular driver. So it's going to have an acoustic center in here, like right about where the tweeter is, right? And then we have the tweeter, which is another driver. When we flip it this way, and we start going off axis, well, guess what? These speakers haven't moved. They're still on the same degree angle, right? As we go off angle. So this one and this one, since it's one speaker, is going at the same degree. But when we flip it this way, these are still playing the same frequency. As we start going this, well, guess what? We're closer to this one and further away from this one. And so we start getting those deconstructive waves. And that's problematic. Now, the issue is because of the tweeter. That's the problem. It's really because of the woofers, but the main reason why this is happening is because the tweeter itself can't cross over low enough.
Okay,
So Elliot, why don't you
ultimately
explain? Okay.
So this has to deal with the frequency response and the distance between those two woofers.
Well, it
Right.
actually has a number of different things. So when we're talking about the actual comb filtering itself, theoretically, you can't really get them close enough to ever get rid of that comb filtering. That's why you only see speakers with one tweeter and not more than one tweeter. No
Except
matter
for the
how small
Morel
they are.
Hogalarte. I actually have a video coming out with the Morel Hogalarte Bluetooth speaker, which has 2 tweeters. And you actually will see
That's
comb filter.
different a little because they're trying to mimic stereo on a small scale, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's 2 tweeters and 1 midwoofer.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're probably still trying to mimic stereo somewhat. Anyway,
I think they're trying for a wider sound stage.
If we go to a low enough frequency, the wavelengths get longer. Because of that, if we cross over at a low frequency, those distances, as you move off axis between the 2 woofers, that is a very, very small part of that wavelength, and it doesn't contribute to anything. And so, well, practically anything. And so it results in minimal interference between the 2 drivers, or the 3
So at
drivers.
low
even.
frequencies, the distance between the 2 drivers relative to the size of the frequency wave is small enough that the interference is negligible.
enough.
And
Exactly. Yep.
yeah, so the interference becomes negligible because you've got large waves and you've got short distances. And this is important because people oftentimes ask me in the YouTube comments about what happens if I make, say, a really long port outside of the enclosure. Well, as long as the subwoofer waves are so long, it doesn't matter. Right? In a car, you're interested in things like, loading. That's it. But you can have a woofer fire forward and a port fire back, and the distance between the 2 things are so small relative to the length of the wave. So it's the distance between the drivers relative to the length of the wave. And at high frequencies, the waves are shorter, so the distance is more important.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And with those low frequency. Oh, sorry, no.
No, I was going to say, so exactly. So typical tweeter, you're going to have to cross over anywhere between 1500 hertz and 3500 hertz. And so when we're talking about frequencies, the small, and it's weird because you don't think of 1535 hertz as a large frequency because it's not, it's really not even towards the middle of the graph.
Why do we cross tweeters over between 1500 and 3000? Why?
Well,
Why
for
can't we
2
just
reasons.
cross
One,
tweeters lower?
because that's what they're capable of being able to do. And 2, that's the distortion area where if you cross over lower, you're going to have distortion issues. But there's all kinds of reasons. But typically 1500 to 3500 hertz is where a typical tweeter is going to be crossed over at. And if you go with a smaller tweeter to get better on-axis frequency response later, right? So let's say we want to go with a 3/4 inch tweeter. Well, it's going to need to be crossed over higher than the 1500 hertz, usually 2500, something of that nature.
Right.
And thank you, Baba. What Kozlak said, hey, hello, Toyd, Elliot, and Justin. And David K said, hey, you guys have probably saved me more than all of my super chats would add up in the last 2 years. So we really appreciate that. That means a lot to us that we are imparting some knowledge that you guys find useful. So thank you so much for that. And so anyway, those frequencies between 1500 and 3500 hertz are so many inches. I can't remember. But when we start dropping down to 300 hertz, 500 hertz, 200 hertz, 100, we're talking feet, not inches. Okay. So now the distance between these two is feet. So when we're going off axis, remember we talked about these are angled, right? But we're talking inches. So when we start going off axis between 1500 and 3500, now we're having issues with this. But when we start crossing over lower, 500, 300, we have so much area. Then when we start going off axis, we're not really off axis of this speaker still. It's still playing within those feet of range that it can. And so that's the whole reason behind using the BMR. That BMR, when we tested it, Elliot, I think you and I both tested it, and I think the distortion profile of that BMR said we had to cross it over if I remember correctly, something like 200 by 250 hertz or something, because distortion started rising after that.
Yeah, around that level for the power we wanted to provide it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we knew that if we took something like a BMR, we could cross it over between 3 and 500 hertz. And if we did that, then we can keep our off-axis response practically the same. And so you can hear this speaker anywhere you sit. And that's really important for a center channel, because now you can go off-axis, sit over in your favorite love seat on your left-hand side, or sit in your favorite recliner on your right-hand side. You don't have to be right in front of it anymore. Everyone can hear it. No one's asking you to turn up the volume. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, because Elliot actually believes that this design is actually superior to a typical MTM as well.
Mm-hmm. Or even a two-way, a tweeter mid.
Oh, even what about a three-way? I'm going to throw a three-way out there.
Even better in terms of dispersion. I mean, three-way, you're just spreading the drivers out even further.
Okay.
More
We're going to talk about
really,
that.
more lobing.
It's really easy for people to look at a three-way and say, hey, it looks like something that I want to try because there's all those moving parts, all those speakers. It's got to be better since there's more in it. But it also increases the complexity, because have you ever tried to design a crossover for a three-way?
Yes.
Because every time I jump into the XSIM and try to do it, I get into it and I go, nope, we're done. I'm not even going to bother. You start looking at the cost of the components. I mean, you increase the complexity of everything by an order of magnitude when you jump into a three-way system. I did a three-way front stage in my truck before I swapped it out for some speakers NDX sent me. And if I didn't have a DSP, it just would be completely unrealistic to even try. DSPs, you just flip a few switches, it's all electronic. But sure, a good two-way, I think, is better than a mediocre three-way. And it's easier to make a good two-way.
I mean, there's reasons why. There's companies like KEF that are trying to do concentric drivers as close to each other as possible. And with just two-way, you're trying to eliminate as much lobing and comb filtering as much as you can, really.
So Andrew Robinson is famous for that, right? With ELAC, he did that a lot. He would do two ways with a concentric driver on top and then a woofer on the bottom. And we're going to actually get into other ways than just BMR is not the only way you can do this. We're going to talk a little bit more about, what are some other ways if you want to scale this up. But before we do this, Elliot, Boondock Josh asked the question, can these be used as surround speakers? What do you think?
100%. I mean, I actually wanted to go into that quite a bit, because the way I'm going to use them is I'm going to use them as every single speaker in my system, because, of course, the best system is the one where you have each and every speaker, apart from your subwoofer, being the same. Now, the benefit of these drivers over two-way and so on, with two-way, you've still got that high-frequency crossover where you're going to get that vertical lobing, or in the case of an MTN, that vertical comb filter.
So basically what we're saying is, as you start to go up and down from the speaker, we're going to have that comb filtering as we go up and down on a typical two-way. So I'm covering this woofer to make it look like a two-way.
Right.
So if it was just this and this. Mm-hmm. But an MTM is designed so it gives you... I'm sorry. I'm going to cut myself up.
Okay.
So yes, what I was going to say is you might assume, okay, it's vertical. Why do we care about the vertical dispersion and everything? Because we're only sat horizontally to each other, like just on the sofa, right? It's the room response. All of the vertical parts where it's dipping and going up, they're all contributing to reflections in your room, which contribute to the overall response. Now, that's going to mean things like your EQ's not going to work as well, because your off-axis response isn't the same as your direct response. You're going to have more variation of sound in your room. It's not going to be as evenly distributed. You're going to have all of your reflections sounding different to your direct response, which as I said, it makes it difficult to EQ and not as easy to EQ. And so having that low crossover point with the MTM, it actually theoretically makes it easier and better to cross over and work as just normal speakers, other than just as a center channel as well.
So I've got a question for you, either one of you. I know that when you're setting up your home theater, you're supposed to have your tweeters at about ear level. That's ideally what you want. Would this design give you a little bit more flexibility? So now you don't have to worry about the relative height of your tweeters versus because you can lower, higher, whatever the case may be.
100%.
Yes.
The wide directivity means that it's less localizable. It's got a wider dispersion. It's going to sound more. You notice the speaker less. That's probably a better way of describing it. It blends more into the background.
So-
you can't pinpoint it precisely, but it still comes from that direction.
Let me explain it this way as well. When we talk about an MTM, we talked about how it was traditionally designed this way, right? So when we go to the left and right of the MTM, this sounds great because this is the way it's designed. We have a very wide dispersion, and that's the reason why people like MTM designs, is because you get that very wide horizontal dispersion. However, we talked about it, we don't get the vertical dispersion, right? So now, when we design it where we can cross over this way, and now we get both the vertical and horizontal. So basically, the vertical and horizontal dispersion is going to be exactly the same. Okay, at the degree, pretty much exactly the same when we go off 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees. And so it's kind of, we talk about room reflection. We don't talk about room reflection enough, but the room reflection is what Elliot is talking about. Like when it bounces off the room and things of that nature, that's going to add an effect to the actual overall sound quality. And this room reflection will all be pretty much the same. Now, the cool thing about this speaker, and I have tested this out quite a bit, I actually use it in this room right over here, which is where we do like some games and some movies for the kids. And you can literally be standing up, sitting down, to the left, to the right. It doesn't matter where you are. It sounds the same. And so when someone asks, like, would this be a good one for surround sound? Yeah. I mean, this would be like perfect for surrounds because you can put them, first of all, whatever orientation that fits your room, right? So if you need it this way, whatever orientation fits your room. And then not only that, it's going to give you such a wide dispersion, which for me is what I really like with surround speakers, because that means that I get that sound like it's coming right behind me, like filling up the room. I like that room filling sound. So even though these are small, they have the ability to really fill up a room. I want to see someone build 5 of these for a whole surround sound. Like that would be, I think that, like, so what, how much do they cost? Like right around $80, right? Elliot, somewhere around $80. Is that what we...
Thereabouts. If you're not considering passive crossover elements, maybe even
No,
less.
that's with the passive. Less with So 80. So let's just say $80. So $400, and that's not counting MDF. So even if you say $500 for 5 of these speakers, I don't think you could get. I would say I don't think you can get a better surround sound system. And then we're not talking just about the rule break. We're going to be talking about other things with like how can we do this with bigger speakers. But just in general, I don't think you could get better small surround sound system for that price that I can think of.
Once you've got a sub, I think I'd agree. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I'm talking about just the speakers. Yeah, you're right.
Just the speakers alone, 100%.
Yeah, you're right. You will need a subwoofer with these. These are not designed. Yeah. These are designed to be used with a sub.
In their current state, anyway.
Oh, Jimmy. Yeah. So we're gonna actually we'll go there next. So Jimmy Rogers though says, "Hey, it's my plan to make 5 for my bedroom setup. I'm starting with 1 this week. Then I'm gonna build the other 4." Jimmy, when you are done, you have to come back and tell us. Go on the forum, share it. I want to know because I'm really excited for people to find this out because I think you're gonna. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't ordered all the parts yet, use the code TOID. And I got the link down below. If you use the code TOID, TOID, all caps, you'll get 5% off your purchase as well. So use that while you're there. No, and he's right. These are more for like a living room setup, bedroom setup. It's not for a home theater.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to suit very large rooms. They're efficient for what they are. I mean, it's 84 dB efficient, the BMR driver itself. And when you're comparing that to something like Klipsch's sensitivity measurements, that's Because they always pick the highest peak, don't they, in their measurements?
Yeah.
Oh, it's 94 dB sensitive.
By the way, that's just a 6 decibel aberration. Okay.
What would
okay.
it look
So-
like if you were to basically double down on this and instead of have 3 drivers, build your enclosures with 6 drivers? 2
You're gonna get
BMRs
phone
and 4
filters
woofers.
Yeah,
What's that?
it's the same problem with any multiple tweeter design, really. Comb filtering,
Gotcha.
it's a pain. I know.
All right. So now tell me, Elliot. So this was a collaboration idea, and the way that this came up was, Elliot's always talking about BMR, and then someone went on the forum and said, "Hey, I want to build a sound bar. What would you do about that?" And all of a sudden, the BMR hit my head, and I was like, you know what? I would use 2 BMRs, and then I'd put 2 woofers on either side, and I think that would be the best sound bar I could possibly build. Assuming, because they were going to use a 2.1 with the subwoofer. I'm like, that's what I would do. And then all of a sudden it hit my head, and I'm like, why aren't we making center channels with BMRs? And then so me and Elliot got talking, and we said, let's do this. And so we did that. Now you have, so I went with the small sealed setup because I wanted to say, hey, look, if you can get a small, I feel like this is the part that people are missing. Like, if you want to build a small speaker setup, you don't get quality, you just get size. And so I wanted to make some, how can we get high quality and the size that you want? So I went sealed. This crosses over between 120 and 80 hertz, but depending on your room and stuff of that nature. But Elliot said, screw that, Nick. I don't want that. I want bass because I want to use these for stereo speakers. So you're doing something a little bit different. Same design, but a little bit different, right?
Right. Well, I am starting off with the sealed version first. It is going to be quite a bit bigger because I'm making it out of concrete.
Whoa.
Whoa, what?
So
Wait,
the idea,
what?
I know, right? The idea is instead we're going to 3D print a mold design in multiple parts. You attach them together, cast the concrete in it, wait for it to dry, and then you can take the mold apart, reuse it. It's still in a work in progress at the moment, but concrete, it's so inert. It's just the ringing. I can actually show you here. So 3/4 thick, 3/4 inch thick MDF. Right, I'm just going to knock it. Hear all that noise?
Yeah.
Also 3/4 inch thick. Could you tell that difference?
Yeah, you could definitely tell the difference.
You just muffle. You just
on this
you,
concrete far harder
Nah.
than it was on the MDF as well. It's just
you just moved it further away from the mic.
yeah.
Hit mute. Yeah, hit mute on the mic. That's it.
Sure I did. Okay.
No, you're right,
you're gonna-
and that's gonna make a difference. And you know what? So I did a stack design with this. This thing is heavy. I don't like holding this for a long period. This is heavy, and that makes a big difference. You can make it obviously rectangular if you want to, but I like the stack design, and I'm really excited about this. So basically, you're going to be making a mold, and then you're going to pour concrete out of the 3D printed mold to make the enclosure, right?
Right. And I've just saw a comment here from Regular Guy Audio saying, make sure you vibrate the mold.
Yeah,
So
to
it's
make sure there's no
actually-
bubbles, right?
Right. But see how there's no bubbles here? It's just that pattern, that texture, that's just limestone chippings that I've used in it. But there's no bubbles. Do you know how I've done that? Well, I've actually been formulating my own concrete mix for it. It's why it's been taking me so long. It doesn't use sand. Instead, it uses fly ash, and that essentially turns it into a slurry. Even you can use less water with it too, and that
nice.
massively makes it easier to pour, makes it easier to fill gaps, and it just and it just means that you hardly even need to vibrate it. Even it slow cures and just releases all of
And
those
it'll be
bubbles
stronger the
that
less
come.
water you use in it.
Yep. And when you use less water in it, you end up with a stronger concrete, and the water doesn't segregate out, and it shrinks less as well. So you've got your dimensional stability there. It stays the same size.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say one more thing. So the fly ash, it's so amazing because what essentially we're doing with it is we're making a really, really lightweight concrete for what concrete is, anyways, because it's just the fly ash is such low density and it actually contributes to the strength too. So it's just win-win, really.
That is actually really awesome. I like hearing that. Now, eventually, though, you're going to make one that has ports in it. We actually
Yes.
designed this together. It's a much larger version,
It is.
and that's why we didn't do it in the beginning, is because it was larger, long ports, and I wanted to do something small that people could get. That I feel like that market's missing. Although it's not going to be huge. It's not real big, but it's going to have ports, and it's ported down to, what is it, 40, 50 hertz?
Oh, I can't remember. We designed it a while ago now, really.
What is
I know,
the
it's-
internal airspace of the sealed version that you built so far?
I mean, it's
0.1. I can't remember.
I can't
It's
remember
pretty
off
small.
the top of my head, to be honest.
It's in the plans. It's in the build plans. You
Yeah,
don't have to know.
it is.
You just need to build them. It's small though. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
you're going to have a
it's
real
all right.
challenge porting it, because if you've got, I mean, small enclosure needs a long port, so it seems to me like you're screaming for the opportunity to use our old friend the passive radiator.
They're not always the best solution. I mean, they take up a lot of X and Y dimension as well. So
Yes.
like you need it to be specifically sized. And honestly, the ports were just easier in this case because you lose a bit of sensitivity with the passive radiator too, in most cases.
Yeah, it's going to be a really cool design. So if you guys want to see that, make sure to subscribe to Elliot Design's channel. He's going to be making a couple different ones. I love the idea of the concrete. I'm sure we'll have him back on as well once concrete's done, because I am super excited about seeing that for obvious reasons. Obviously, I'm going to build some as well, because why wouldn't I? Like, that's just cool. And then maybe I'll actually have the full 5-channel. I have the uglies in the in that room next door, but I might just have to get rid of the uglies or something. I don't know. I don't want to get rid of the uglies.
Nick, you should be able to make quite a few of these quite cheaply and quite easily if you use the remolding of the 3D print.
Yeah, and I do have a 3D printer. So, all right, let's talk about this. So we have the ideas of how to do it. If we want to go larger, bigger subwoofer. I'm sorry, bigger center channel speaker. So we have the small one. If we want to go bigger, is it possible? And if so, what would you, I, or Justin do to make a larger speaker like this for like home theater? Like someone said, I want to do one for home theater. Someone wanted to do one for home theater. What are some of the ways you would do it? Because there's multiple options, right?
See, I'm really looking forward to the answer to this question, because I'm looking at this going, can you do a pair of 8s off to the side and a bigger BMR? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, you can do a
Technically
12
you
if you
could,
want.
but you're still limited by the sensitivity of the BMR itself, because as we discussed earlier, we can't just shove a second BMR on because we're going to get that
Cone filtering.
cone filtering. There are
But we
some
don't have to
alternatives.
use-
You can use wide dispersion horns that cross over low. Those can work quite well because the horn loading often allows you to cross over quite a bit lower. There are some other more mid-range drivers that still, more full-range drivers that still behave quite well up in high frequencies that are higher sensitivity. You could use some of those. I'm interested on knowing what thoughts you have, Nick.
So I have a couple different ideas, and you guys are welcome to. We're bouncing ideas off our heads. I've seen it done. So what some people do is, instead of, some people will do a tweeter and a mid-range and then 2 woofers. We don't like that idea as much because of what we just said before. Your vertical off axis is still going to differ from your horizontal. It's going to be better horizontally, but not as good vertically. So I think a couple ways that you could do it would be using a concentric or coaxial driver in the center. So something like Dayton Audio sells that coaxial. You could do something like that in there. Another way would be to use this guy, which is the Eminence N314X. Have you guys seen this yet?
No.
No.
What is that?
This is what they call their tech stream. So I've been on and on and on about getting a compression coaxial driver because they can cross over so low. Problem with compression coaxial drivers is twofold. One, they're expensive, like real expensive, like $600+ for like one, and that's like the cheap one. And then you look at the horn, and the horn to cross over is like an additional $300. So you're looking at almost $1,000 just to create for one speaker. You don't even have the woofers in yet or the crossover, so it can get expensive. So Eminence came out with this. This is called their Tech Stream, and I'm going to be doing a project with these. This is the N314X. I need to get... And so this N314X is their Tech Stream driver. This is an 8-ohm driver that is designed in a way with their own technology. It's supposed to have all the benefits of titanium, but not have the harshness of the titanium. I'm actually going to have an Eminence guy on the channel soon. And we're actually going to record it sometime this week, so hopefully I'll get it out next week. And he's going to explain this technology and other things so you guys can understand it. It's a 1.5-inch driver that can cross over as low as 700 hertz with a second-order crossover. So that's going to be pretty awesome. You could actually use some... You could literally go up to almost a 15-inch driver, even larger, and cross this over with one, and have a really nice two-way. And now this takes care of all your issues in the essence of sensitivity that we were talking about. You know, you want two 12s on the side for your home theater. You want this on there with two 12s. Go right ahead. You should be able to do pretty well with that. The only issue with the Tech Stream is it's not cheap. It's not expensive, but I mean, it's $350. But the horn that uses this is only $70, and it's a metal horn. So you're only looking at like $420, which is a lot. That's less than one compression coaxial.
I'm going to be very intrigued as to how to. I'm going to be absolutely besotted with that stream next week because mitigating the ringing from the metal horn and the titanium driver, I'm going to be really interested in knowing how they did that.
Well, I don't know if they got rid of the ringing from the metal horn. That's the concern that I had. I actually said that with my patron. We had a behind the scenes patron video, and I said, my concern is the ringing from the metal driver or the metal horn. So we'll find out. Yeah.
I mean, if they got rid of the harshness in the driver of the coaxial, that's they've probably gotten rid of the ringing inside the driver somehow, because that's where the harshness usually comes from. So yeah, I'd be interested in that.
So I want to point out something here. We're talking about scaling up this speaker you've designed, where you could do your entire surround sound 5.1 setup for $400 in components. And now you're talking about scaling up one of those drivers, and the tweeter itself is going to be more than $400 by the time you're done sticking the horn on the front of it. So at this point, you're not talking about the same thing. You're talking about the same principle, which is cross the tweeter over as low as possible so you can prevent that off-axis lobing, but it's not really the same speaker at this point.
Well, it's difficult, Justin. It's the rule breaker. It's punching well above its price bracket.
It really is. Yeah, there's a reason why it breaks rules, man. This one's just the jailbreaker, or actually, this one's the wallet breaker.
I like that jailbreaker. You got a rule breaker and a jailbreaker.
A jailbreaker.
Right? It takes more effort to break out of jail than it does to break the rules and get into jail.
To get into jail,
I got a question for both of you.
Brilliant. I love that.
So I've had this BMR for a long time. I bought this back before I started my channel. And so this is not what I would call a new technology. And you're telling me that this BMR does some really cool stuff, that it's better than the tweeter, better than a mid-range, because you have the flexibility, because you have wide dispersion. Why are people not putting BMRs in the dashes of their cars? Why are we not seeing BMRs in car audio? What's the story here? Because there's got to be some downside to this thing, because y'all are telling me these things are like gold here. What's the deal with them?
Well, what gold?
And I like them, by the way. My experience with them has been great. So, but
the one you've specifically got there, Justin, unfortunately, other than its ability at going low and full range, it's not actually that good in the highs. But in terms of BMRs in general, they're a proprietary technology. They're owned by Tectonic Audio Labs. Companies aren't going to risk putting them into their own products when they don't know if they can get a secure supply of them in future, and the pricing, they won't be able to make as good of a margin on them as they would cheap drivers that they can get en masse. As for car audio, I can see a couple of reasons. One, maybe people just haven't recognized it, or two, that wide dispersion. Oh, I think my camera. No, it's all right. That wide dispersion is going to mean you're going to get a lot more of reflections, and in a car, those reflections are a lot less desirable because of all of the glass. So you're going to have a lot of accentuated highs and things like that. So maybe that's the case.
I feel like it's
to me.
I feel like it's the same reason with spoiler alert. I have a video coming out on the Morel Bluetooth audio speaker. Anyway, I'll give you a quick spoiler for everyone that's listening, just for you guys. The best on-axis Bluetooth speaker I've ever heard. Definitely good for critical listening on axis. Really good. Another spoiler, measures really flat, right? On axis, really good flat, plus or minus like 2.5 decibels pretty much throughout the whole frequency response, which is great. And you'll see that in the video tomorrow. Sorry, guys. Spoiler alert. Or whenever the video comes out this week. However, I feel like with a Bluetooth speaker, at times, that can be less than desirable because you usually put them in locations that are not designed well for audio. So if I put it, like, for example, in my kitchen with high reflective surfaces, it becomes a lot harsher to my ears than it would be if I put it in my theater room or my room with carpeted and stuff of that nature. But when I have those, granite countertops and the laminate vinyl flooring and the wooden cabinets and everything else, I'm getting those reflections where at times I can feel it's like a little bit harsh, even though I know it's not measuring that way.
Can I actually add a bit of something onto that there, Nick?
Sure.
So, when you're talking about the different things in your room causing different accentuated frequencies and stuff based on where you've put that speaker, it's going to sound harsher in the high.
Yeah, and based on the and I'm going to go one step further and say also based on the type of material.
100%. Yep, exactly. Yeah. It absorbs and reflects different frequencies different ways, and when you EQ that to compensate for it, when you do a general room EQ, what you're actually doing is, yes, you're EQing the whole response to be better, but that direct response, you're actually making it worse if it was ideal in the first place. That's why people always suggest room treatment, because you need it to be able to get a good overall response.
First of all, real quick, Living Loud that Andy said, hey, Elliot's accent makes him sound even smarter. I wish I had an accent.
Well, to me, it's not an accent because...
Well, Andy, you do have an accent. Everyone has an accent.
Well,
I think he wishes he had a cool accent.
Yes, I was saying it in the way that Andy was saying it in terms of having an accent, it being different to what you used to.
And Mr. EE said, hey, you sound... Well, it's not true. But Andy said, I'm sorry, Mr. E says, Andy, you sound well posh to us Brits. Okay, Blake Brockhouse also said, hey, also tuning BMRs properly is not necessarily easy. Before we go on to that, though, because I know Elliot's going to argue with that. So before we get on to that, the whole point that we're making is that if you want to make a large theater speaker, like an MTM style theater speaker, and you want to use something like this Eminence driver, which, by the way, take 5% off, use code TOYED if you want, link down in the description. I'm going to turn into Justin. No, I just like saving money, so I like to save other people money. You can do that with this. The horn, though, is not sold at Parts Express anymore. You have to buy it directly from Eminence, but they drop ship it, so it's not a big deal. Anyway, you can do it. You can scale this design up with other drivers and still have the same thing that we're talking about, where you'll have a very good vertical dispersion as well as horizontal dispersion. And a lot of this comes down to where you're going to cross it over. Mm-hmm. And I want to be very clear about this. A lot of drivers will say you can cross it over by 500. That BMR said you can cross over by what, like 80 or 100 hertz, somewhere in that range. I think
150, I think that one was.
150. Okay, so BMRs will say anything, but what you have, what you need to do, and I swear the best thing to do is buy the Omni mic. I mean, you can buy the UMIC one, that's fine. I'm not gonna, but I would rather buy the Omni mic if I'm gonna do this a lot. That's my personal opinion. It is a lot more expensive, so buy a UMIC if you want to. I don't care. Take a distortion profile. I have not taken a distortion profile of this yet, so I don't know. I mean, I know that the frequency response is capable of crossing over at 700 hertz. Having said that, we have to take a frequency response to make sure that if we cross over at 700 hertz, we're not getting this enormous distortion issue, because if we are, we're still creating other issues in our design that is less than desirable.
Right. The thing is about those compression drivers as well is that distortion profile is going to change based on the horn you put on it. The reason they're called horns is because you have horn loading, you've got that back pressure, it keeps the driver from vibrating too much at those low frequencies. It's like a port. It's like a ported box. It takes off the energy from the diaphragm, damps it down so it barely moves. It's like that, but for high frequencies, that's how horns work, really, almost. And so, depending on what horn you choose, is going to depend on how low you can cross it over to.
So I'm gonna call it Jimmy Rogers here. I'm excited about this, but I'm going to say that this is not really correct. So I'm gonna read what he said. Something like an Eminence CX8 with a D220 Ti compression will get good off-axis like this. You can add two 1012 woofers and run a three-way setup. So here's the deal. The Eminence CX8, have you guys seen that?
No, I don't really look into compression drivers too much.
So the
CX, price range.
It's an 8-inch woofer that has a very, very small little horn inside the woofer. Okay, this real small conical style horn, and you screw in a compression driver in the back.
Right.
Okay. And I've seen that style. I don't know if I've seen that exact speaker.
I think you've done a video on with a similar style of driver to that, haven't you, Nick?
Yeah, the CX10.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The problem with the CX8 is a couple fold. One is that when the woofer is moving, you actually get issues with the waveguide and it bouncing off of while the woofer's moving. I can't remember what the terminology is for that, but you have issues that way. And then not only that, the way the horn is designed, Elliot has already explained this. Think of it like this: if you cup your hands real close, right, you create a real narrow horn, and anyone directly in front of it can hear it really well. But if you go like this, now you get a much wider horn, but now the person right in front of you can't hear it nearly as well as now the whole side, right? So when you're yelling, if you're yelling to someone directly in a certain area that you cup your hands and you point it like this so that it amplifies your sound in that direction. The way the CX8 works is it's designed that it doesn't get a great off-axis response. It gets a really decent on-axis response, but off-axis, it's just too small of a horn to be able to do real well off-axis. Now, I still use the the CX10 and CX8. I really like for Atmos style speakers or something, but I don't think it would work nearly as well in this type of system because it's probably only going to get you 15 to 30 degrees off axis, maybe 30, 50, real decent axes. And then when we talk about horns, there's different types of horns too, right? So we have what we call exponential horns, which also don't have as great of an off-axis response. And then we have what we call constant directivity horns. Constant directivity horns are the ones that have a much better off-axis response. So if you're designing something with these, it's usually best to do a constant directivity if you can. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be using an exponential horn.
Right, but constant directivity horns are only constant directivity if they're designed to be constant directivity for that specific compression driver, because different compression drivers have different diameter diaphragms, different shaped diaphragms, and different mesh grills, and all of that's going to just change its dispersion properties, and now it's not going to be constant directivity anymore. That original, not as constant directivity as it could be anyways.
And now we're going to go to Baba's comment that says, I wonder if we all sound like Neanderthals to Elliot.
No. Don't be silly.
That is
Not at
funny.
all.
So I've got to ask about this. We just barely mentioned it. We kind of brushed over the coincentric drivers, which is different from a coaxial. Apparently, I'm not sure exactly what makes them different.
We don't want to go there. We don't want to go there this time. I saw your face. We're not doing it right now. Okay, because we still want to talk about lasers. You want to talk about lasers, so we got.
Just real quick. I've got a pair of the ones that Parts Express sells. They came in the boombox build off we did ages ago, back when Hi-Fi Vega still would hang out with us.
Who?
And I didn't like that build because the crossover was really complicated. I want to say it was a third order crossover on that coincentric driver between the tweeter and the woofer. And once you start adding all those crossover components, it really gets a whole lot more complicated than DIY. And so I would skip right over the coincentric and I would jump into one of those horns.
Can I plug something here? On my channel, I've actually got a couple of videos that show you how to. If you have like a desktop PC with like a bunch of analog outputs, if you get yourself some amplifiers, I've got a setup where you can just for free do active crossovers, and then you don't need any crossover components or anything really.
That's really cool.
A whole bunch easier if you have access to it.
Oh, cool.
So one thing I want to mention, because we did talk about compression drivers. One thing I do want to mention is that if we're talking about compression drivers and you want to do the same thing that we're talking about, when you buy your horn has to have the same off-axis degrees. So a horn will say like a 60 by 40 or 60 by 30 or 90 by, and that's talking about the horizontal and vertical off-axes. So if it says 60 by 40, for example, or 90 by 40, it's only going to go 40 in one direction and 90 in the other as far as your horizontal dispersion. So guess what? Your horizontal dispersion isn't this. We want our horizontal dispersion to be as close to the same as possible. So we'd want a 90 by 90 or 60 by 60. Elliot, what, do you want to disagree with me?
It's sometimes manufacturers use those as dimensions instead. So you need to be a bit careful on that, because sometimes they actually use those numbers like 60 by 80 and so on as actual dimensions.
Sure, like the dimension of the actual...
Yeah, the width and
versus
the height,
the actual dispersion. Yeah, and it should tell you that most horns that you go by will tell you the dispersion characteristics either way. So just clarify that. All right, now Justin, you wanted to talk about, and I think we have enough time to talk about, you said you want to talk about lasers.
Tell me about this laser. What the hell is this thing that can cut through 1/2-inch hardwood?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so this all was designed with an X-Tool laser. I didn't put the link in there, but watch the video. And if you want to buy one, I just ask that you use my link. It does give me a little bit of commission, and it lets X-Tool know that I sent them your way. I do really love... I've had 5 lasers, and the X-Tool is so far my favorite one. They actually come with programs to make it really easy, which is nice. Most of them just say, figure out what program you want to use and go buy it. And I'm like, okay. It's true, isn't it, Elliot? Elliot knows exactly what I'm talking about. So this actually cut through. This is solid cherry and solid maple. And it cuts through it. Now, it doesn't... I'm not going to say that it does it fast, because that's not true. It's not. It takes a while to do. And it's a limited cutting area. I think the cutting area is something like 15 by 15 or 17 by 17. I don't really remember. You can get extensions to make it a little longer, but it's pretty cool. It goes it just takes about 5 times around it, like 5 millimeters a second is what I did. In about 5 cuts, it cuts all the way through this 1/2-inch material, and you're good to go. And the thing that's cool about a laser is a CNC has a bit, and I actually have one right here. And this was not planned. I just have CNC bits everywhere. And CNC bits, though, yes, white side. This is a V-bit groove, but we'll focus on the end of it. If you focus on the end of it, which you can't see, it's a circle, just like a drill bit, right? Like it's a circular. So because of that, when you make a corner cut anywhere, it can never get square. right? Because it has to have the radius of the bit.
Okay.
Now, when you're using a laser, that's also true because a laser is also a circle, but the laser is so small of a circle that you can pretty much get a square cut. So things like this BMR cutout, which typically would be very, very hard to do, the laser can do it very, very easily. The laser and 3D printers are ways that you can do that. You can also do this with a CNC. Don't get me wrong. This particular one,
It just takes time because you have to swap out bits, because otherwise it takes forever if you're using a tiny bit, and that would be ridiculous. But you'd be swapping out bits for different sizes so you can get all the details, and it's just if you don't have a tool changer, it's an absolute nightmare. Something like that.
So what Elliot? If it was you and you could only get one tool, you're limited to $1,000. Let's just say $1,000 because that's about what a laser costs. Would you get a laser or a cheap CNC?
I'd make a print NC.
No, stop. No, normal. I know what a print NC is. Let's talk like realistically. You want a store bought, and I don't know the answer. What you're going to say? I'm just curious what you would say. I have my ideas.
I would say, because of space constraints, I'd say CNC. Because anything large enough that I would want to do already, I'd just do on my 3D printer, to be honest, because that's what I'd want to do. But if it was CNC, I can work with a wider variety of materials, metals and stuff for other projects.
All right. Here's what I'm thinking. This is my opinion. So I've had cheap CNCs. Cheap CNCs use belt drive, just like the laser. Laser is belt drive as well. Just like a 3D printer, they're belt drive. I don't like belt drive CNCs. I'm just not a fan of belt drive CNCs.
I didn't realize it would be belt drive. I've not looked at them, to be fair. So
yeah. So you're going to get, you're going to have what we call backlash. It's also not going to be nearly as accurate over the long hole because you're going to start getting belt stretch. You can't go nearly as deep because you're going to be cutting. So you have those things to fight with. Plus, you need to worry about dust extraction for the particles that you're cutting up. So some type of shop vac. Now, you also have to worry about extraction of fumes from the lasers. When it's cutting, you want to extract those fumes. But it's much easier and quieter to extract fumes than it is to extract material. So I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I don't have a definite answer. I think
there isn't one really.
Yeah,
they're good for
it's preference.
Things.
Yeah. So I like the idea of I wouldn't buy a Shapeoko or an X-Carve either way because they're too expensive for what you get. I would try to save up if I was going to do a CNC. Try to save up for something that's going to be like a ball drive or at least screw drive, if nothing else. And if not, and I wanted to get myself in the way of something, I think I'd probably start off with a laser, a 20 watt if I could, 10 watt if I can't, and go there. I will just admit that a laser does take time to get used to because every material, for example, has, as you can imagine, it takes it cuts through differently, right? It's going to cut through.
Right,
and plywood is actually one of the harder things to cut through because of all the glue. It reacts differently in different parts, right?
Not surprised. Talk to me about the software and the process of, say, I like drawing my designs in SketchUp. So I've just taken a real simple baffle. It's got some circles in SketchUp. How hard is it to input that simple baffle into that laser cutter? And how hard was it to get the shape of that BMR into the laser cutter so you could cut it out exactly?
That's a good question. Let's ask Elliot that. Elliot designed the BMR part.
That shape of the BMR. So initially, so Tectonic, how you have your specification sheets with all of the data on it and everything. It had a front view of that BMR. I took a portion of the screenshot of it covering that image, imported it into my CAD software, traced over it with precise values like 40 millimeters, think numbers that 42 millimeters, numbers that they'd actually use when designing it, print it out, test it. Okay, need to make these couple little adjustments. And then I think by the time it was my third print, I had it right and it was close fitting and everything.
So, so now that we say that mine didn't convert properly. So the plans, the build plans, if you want to, I actually have an exact drawing that you can print out and put on wood and cut out however you want to, router, whatever. So you can cut that out. Now, if you buy the other plans that include they actually include the SVG and DXF files. So if you want to laser cut this or put this on a CNC, it has the files for that. So you can do that. You don't have to worry about measuring it. But that was actually the one concern that Elliot and I had about this project. We both talked about that quite extensively. How are we going to get people to be able to recess that BMR? And technically, you don't have to recess it. You should, but technically, you don't have to. I know, Elliot. I know.
Between the spade terminals and the frame itself, you might even have trouble not recessing it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But,
so that is actually going to be an issue. But I got to say, like, it came out really well, and I was really happy that the first time I laser cut out that BMR, when he sent me over the file, I had converted it from millimeters to inches because that's what my software was using. No, it usually converts it just fine, but it converted it way too large, and I cut it and I was like, this doesn't fit. So then I had to look at the spec sheet and see what it was supposed to be, and then I just changed it to that size and then saved it. And so
at least you didn't have to redo the shapes.
Well, you know what I love about the BMR though? The BMR is 3 millimeters, and so because it's exactly 3 millimeters thick, you can just cut it out on 3 millimeter material, which you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. Like you can just buy that, and if you just cut that shape out, it will automatically recess the right size for you. By the way, 3 millimeters is about 1/8 of an inch. Is that right, or is it 1/4 of an inch?
I have no idea.
It's 1/4 of an inch. It's like 0.118.
Right. It's just under 1/4 of an inch. So my only experience with a laser was going to the local library and etching an image onto the boombox build with one of the what do you call it, the standard brand laser everyone uses, and I quickly realized that the way that machine is set up, it's really designed to have a graphic, size the graphic to go on whatever piece you're cutting and set it loose. And it didn't seem to me like it would be very easy to put in measured drawings. And what we need to do is we need measured drawings. We need whether it's metric or freedom units, doesn't matter to me. We're glad that Mike is appreciative.
So cool, whether it's killing me tonight, dude.
or metric units, it doesn't matter. But if you can take some type of measured drawing, a CAD drawing, or the case, and plug it into the machine, that's a big deal, and that's what I don't know how to do. So,
yeah, and you're right, and that's why I wanted to make sure that the DXF and files and stuff were available to people so that they could do it, especially with the BMR cutout. I don't know. I would say probably a laser would be where I would start with most people, and then save up for a good CNC. Don't do the mistake that I did and buy a cheap CNC. Buy a good one.
But if you do go the laser cutting route, be very careful with what materials you cut. Even if you have a really good extraction and filtering system, you don't want to be cutting things like MDF, certain types of plywood that use also like formaldehyde that's used in MDF.
Right.
Very, very cancerous and poisonous.
Toxic.
Don't want it. No.
Right.
But,
let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Don't set fire to toxic things.
Yes, very much so. But I just have a tip for those of you, if you're stuck with a belt CNC machine, you can get higher quality belts. Belts typically have a grading for the amount of glass fibers extruded throughout them. Like, for example, my Prusa 3D printer, it's got these brown, really rough, really rigid glass fiber belts, and that's going to take a lot of your a lot of the stretchiness out of it, and that you're going to get a lot more preciseness.
let's talk about two reasons why we're talking about belt stretch. One, because after a while it stretches. So now when you think you're cutting 5 inches by 5 inches, you're really cutting 5 1/8 or 5 1/4, right? Now, the other issue that we're talking about is how deep of a pass you can go. Because what will happen is you'll think, well, it's a CNC, it's just cutting through. I'll go ahead and do a 1/4 inch. So let's just say you're cutting a 1/4 inch out of hardwood pretty much everywhere. And then all of a sudden you hit, what do you call that? A knot in the wood. Well, guess what? Now, what's going to happen is the CNC is going to think it's going to keep moving, but that knot in the wood is going to prevent it from really cutting very well. And it's going to skip steps. So all of a sudden you were cutting like a 5 by 5 inch, and now it skipped 2 or 3 steps, and now it's cutting 5 by 4.5 to try to finish that. And now, everything is off from then on out, and it ruined the whole project. That actually happened quite a bit with my Shapeoko. So one of the designs I did with that was building your own guitar speaker, which I actually built with an Eminent speaker. And I built this own guitar speaker, and that took me forever because I wanted to create a dovetail system on it, or box cut system, I'm sorry. And it looked beautiful, but I failed at cutting that thing like 50 times. I'm not even like so many times. I had to cut different pieces out again and again and again. And that's why I say, like, I would just rather not do a belt style system. Just pass that, then go to something like I use a CNC for Newbie, but you could do their CNC for Newbie New Carve, which I don't make any money. I'm not an affiliate with them. And I think that's probably one of the first ones I would go with, because you can actually do like you can start with like a basic router, or you can go with something as like a high end, like liquid cooled router if you want to. It'll handle any of those things. It was actually designed for those people that are like, that started with their Shapeoko and X-Carve and said, this stinks. Can I get a better system? And they're like, sure, let's build this. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. And so it was designed as an upgrade. And then they're like, people liked it so much, they're like, let's also sell a controller with it. Like, okay. So, thank you.
One of the reasons why I haven't gone down the laser route or the 3D printer route, because I don't want to buy one that can't get the job done. Right. I want to make sure that I've saved up where I can go ahead and I've got the money to buy one where I'm not going to, 2 years from now be going, oh crap, now I got to go spend 3 times. I want to avoid the buy once, cry once when I buy the laser or a 3D printer. And I don't want to buy one and have it sit and collect dust and not do anything with it. So it needs to be easy to use. And I need to ramp up my skills in using it as quickly as possible. And it's like, I don't think I have time to figure out how to use the darn thing. And I mostly have stayed away for that very reason.
Justin, I 100% agree. It's why, like, when I bought my first printer, my Pros, it's why I saved up for so flipping long to get it. Because I wanted something that I didn't have to be tinkering around with, fixing it all the time. And so I saved up for that thing. Haven't had to touch it once since I built it.
Like I know with some 3D printers, the first thing you do after you get it put together is you 3D print improved parts. It's like,
well, no, that used to be the case. It's a little bit better.
I'm not playing that game. I'm not. This is one of those things where it needs to work out of the box. It needs to be pretty easy to set up, because I struggle getting videos out on a regular basis. I missed yesterday getting my video out, and so I just don't have time to learn how to use this massive new piece of technology, set it up, calibrate it. If I'm going to spend all day calibrating my laser, and then when I'm ready to cut something out, spend all day recalibrating it, I don't want it. It's not going to do me any good.
So I'm gonna mention this. Bob said, hey, define a good CNC. What's the minimum price range we should be looking at? So here's the deal. I always go to CNC for New Carve. Now, before, inflation, that thing was like between $1,000 and $1,500, starting out. And I think if you went with like the highest end, you were like at $2,500 or $3,000. That's like a 4 foot by 4 foot or something close like that. Maybe 40 inches by 40 inches, somewhere in that range. So I was like, okay, that's good. But now I just looked at it because I wasn't sure. For their smallest one, it actually starts off at $2,300 now. Oh. So it has gone up a lot since it first started. And if you want to get the 45, which is, and that does not include the spindle, by the way, you need to buy a spindle of some kind.
Right.
So, but I would say you're looking at somewhere in the $2,000 range typically to start out. I'm just glad I bought my. So if you bought, the thing is, it's $2,300 and $3,300 if you want like the largest one that they have. kit. So it's a
I
lot.
pulled up
lot
their
more.
webpage. You want to pop it up on the screen real quick? We can kind of show it. So
Yeah.
which one are you looking at? The
Go to CNC machine kits. It's called the New Carve. I have the Pro Series, but I think the New Carve is what most people would want. I got mine, thankfully, before inflation because that's crazy. All right. Now, these are made in Canada. Our good friends in Canada make these. I don't. Now, here's the deal. Like, you can get like a Laguna, which Mullen is talking about over here, and they'll cost you like $3,000, and it'll be like a little desktop one. So it's not necessarily crazy expensive. It's just more expensive.
yeah, 45. Is that
So
in
it says
millimeters or?
Yeah, so it says it's 500 millimeters by so if you go to kit dimensions and you click on it, it'll tell you the different kit dimensions. So 45 by 45 is I think it's like 4 foot by 4 foot or somewhere in that range, 40 inches.
Either that or it's talking about the extrusion width. So, the metal things, maybe it's 45 millimeters by 45 millimeters, maybe.
You need a spindle mount. You need a wiring kit. You have to have all these things, right? You can't just buy it without the add-ons.
Here you go. So it travels 51 by 52, the 45. It says at the bottom. The 500 is 15 by 14 and a half. So really, no matter what, most people are going to get at least probably the 750, which is going to cut like 2 foot by 2 foot, or maybe the 8,000. Yeah. So you need to have the spindle mount. I usually offer, say, the bigger spindle mount because then you can get one that's actually like liquid cooled. But
liquid cooled. That sounds crazy.
Mine's liquid cooled. I haven't changed the water once.
Well, if it's a closed loop, you'd probably be hoping that you wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Because if you do, then something's gone wrong somewhere.
Right.
So the reason why they offer all these, right? So they offer the stepper motors because if you already had a CNC like the X-Carve or the Shapeoko that uses belts, you may not need those stepper motors, right? Those stepper motors are better. These ones are better than the ones on there, but you might want to stick with what you have.
So if you're jumping in with no CNC, you need the 4 269 ounce stepper motors.
Yeah, and then you would need the Demon controller, but you wouldn't need that if you already had one. Here's the deal. It's not worth going with a Shapeoko or an X-Carve first. It's better to just go with something like this. They also make, and I've never tried this. I wouldn't do the 4 foot by 4 foot one, but they also make one called the Work Bee. Have you heard of that one?
Okay.
Not new cars.
Okay.
But you can buy those CNCs and they're significantly cheaper, but they're from China and they're screw drive and they're not as good. I'm not going to say they're good, but you can probably get one. I'm going to actually look right now. It says you can get one for, it says $450. That cannot include that must not include the controller. I don't see it saying anything about including the controller.
It could just be a really bad controller.
It could be a really bad controller. Oh, here's the full kit. All right, there we go. I was like, that's not right. All right, so let's do 1,000 by 1,000 just to be curiosity. Screw driven with the motors. We'll go with a Mach 3 controller and a 2.2 kilowatt spindle, and we'll just say black in color. I don't care. That's about $1,200.
It always frustrates me when they list spindles in kilowatts because efficiency changes between them. It's just not a good tool for measurement, really.
No, you're right.
If I were going to get a CNC machine again, I'd want to make sure that I've buy a really good one, make sure it's something I can use, make sure it's something that'll be usable. I don't see that it would be smart to buy one that's less than 4 foot by 4 foot.
I agree. And that was my issue.
That's a half sheet of plywood or MDF. Just cut it in half at Home Depot and then slide on the CNC machine and let it rock.
Unless you're trying to cut something like metal, in that case, the smaller size for like a given build, it's going to be more rigid. It's going to be able to handle higher stresses. The larger it is, the lower the accuracy, the more it wobbles about.
Or can. the great thing about like the new car, I'm not the CNC new car, but CNC for Newbie, their Pro version, is they use really really thick ball screws, and
Okay.
so you don't have to worry about it. But what you're talking about is like a whiplash of the screw drive, right? So if you start going too fast with the screw drive and you hold it down, the screw will actually whiplash, and so the Work Bee actually does a 4 foot by 4 foot model, but their screw drive is so thin for it, and they don't have any anti-backlash on it, that as you're going back and forth, it can be problematic, especially when it moves fast. And that's why I always tell people, if you're gonna go with like the Work Bee route, don't go with the 4 foot by 4 foot. Go with the smaller version. And if you want to go with a 4 foot by 4 foot, either look rack and pinion or big ball screws.
It wasn't even that I was on about, to be honest, Nick. It's more the
Oh, I'm
fact
sorry.
that no, it's all right. It's the actual extrusions themselves flexing. It's just that minimal you can't visibly see it, but it results in inaccuracies, and like you can't push it as fast without getting problems, things like that. That's what I was referring to, really.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well,
no, it counts for the same thing with the ball screws, 100%, with the backlash.
So I did check on their Pro Series. Their Pro Series 4 foot by 4 foot is $6,252 now. I bought mine a
Is
couple
that just
years
the
ago.
base machine without all the other stuff that you need? Right? That's
No,
just the
that's-
base machine with all
No,
the.
that's the machine with everything except the spindle. You'll need to buy a spindle, which is about $200 or $300.
Gotcha.
So I mean, that I'll tell you right now, it's gone up considerably from when I bought it.
That's how things go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That mini DSP
I didn't buy mine that long
I
ago.
just installed. When I bought it a year and a half ago, it was a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if half of it's the electronics, with how that's been for the past few years, particularly.
Yeah. Getting the right parts. And you know, the one thing that I really liked about that particular company that we were talking about, CNC for Newbie, is that they really care about like making sure everything's right for you and everything. And they really care about getting you good parts for your machine, not just parts for your machine.
Yeah.
Which is important.
The
So,
customer
guys-
experience. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the customer experience is such an important factor with these kind of machines. It's something you actually is worth caring about when you choose a machine like these.
We have gone on for way too long, so we're going to get off. Guys, we're going to tell you this right now. First of all, we hope that Mike had a great birthday. We absolutely hope he had a fantastic birthday. Feel free to Simpson us anytime, but we will only take it if it's super chats. Next, if you guys, we are going to be out. Is there anything you guys want to say before we go? Otherwise, we'll go do our normal procedure of seeing what's next on your channels.
Well, with how long this thing's taken me, because I have to iterate it like once per week, really, at the moment. Maybe 2 weeks I might have something out, not on this project, but on something else. But
Ooh.
we'll hope and see. Hey,
No,
how about
we're
you,
not going to
Justin?
get.
I have. If you want to share the screen real quick, I'm working on the edit at the moment. I've got a review of this wire crimper that has some features and benefits that are a lot better than the standard kind of wire crimper with a die. Hopefully, I'll have this up for my patrons sometime this week. I would have had this video out yesterday, but I kept having trouble with the edit and working on my script. I couldn't. I was trying to get through the video without sounding dirty or making a reference to masturbation, because my script kept talking about pumping it up with one hand, and it's just like, no, I can't say that. So I had to toss the entire video and redo it because I knew that I couldn't say what.
I'm glad you couldn't say it on there, but you could say it on here. I mean, I could never say that, but I'm going to say it right now.
It's a really cool crimper. You can see the spring right here. It's
Jeez.
spring loaded, so you can pump it with one hand. It's like, oh, I can't say that. So I had to refilm about 10 times. It's been a complete
But you're
train
saying
wreck.
it
So-
now, Justin.
So, Justin, you know what's funny? I actually had the same issue because with the rule breaker, I almost had this little. The thing got too long, but I had this thing and this whole thing set up that said, "Hey, are you tired of not getting hardwood? Like you want to use?" You want to use your hardwood, but all you can get is soft wood in the size that you want. What if you could get much bigger, harder wood, easier? And then I was going to go on about the planer and how that can make it much cheaper for you to utilize hardwood versus, like pine. And I realized that didn't come across correctly.
Obviously, about the super chats, it just rolled in. We just picked up $40 in super chat. So clearly,
yes,
our audience wants us to talk about our hardwood and our one-handed pump.
Well, we're helping them have a great weekend. Thank you, David K. and Bobo, for the super chats. We really do appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to your pumping video. So, do you have anything else that you want to talk about before I get off of your pumps?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take it there, but that's just where it went.
No. Hey, check this out. So these are wireless earbuds. They say 100% because that's showing you how much they are. I'm not doing a video on these, by the way. Edon, the company that I did a review for a display for the car head unit, which, by the way, is still the only one that I've ever found that's Android-based that I like. So if you are looking for an Android-based head unit, only one. I still use it every day in my car. Never had one issue with it that I can think of, at least. They sent me these for free because it's their 20th year anniversary. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to use them with my, what do we call that? The VR headset that we have. Oculus Quest 2.
The Quest 2?
Yeah, I have the Quest 2.
Yeah.
That's the one you have too, right, Elliot?
Yeah.
Only the cool kids have an Oculus Quest 2, by the way. And if you want to buy one, use our Amazon affiliate links down below. No, seriously, those things are actually really cool. I actually really like it. I just bought a new game for that. Cabin, where it's like kind of like Call of Duty Zombies. Zombies are coming after you, and you got to shoot them in VR. It's pretty cool. They've actually created two.
I mostly just play Beat Saber. Modded Beat Saber, though.
I like Beat Saber. Yeah. But what I have going on my channel, besides the hardwood, I have the Morel Hoglarte speaker that's going to come out very shortly. Then I have the Eminence, which we talked about, and that's going to just depend on when I can get on air with the gentleman from Eminence. So that'll be kind of nice. He doesn't want to do it live, as a lot of people don't like to do it live, because what we do live is hard, because next thing you know, you're talking about hardwood or pumping it up, and people are like, what the heck are these guys talking about? Where's their OnlyFans page? That type of stuff. So we got to be careful. But wait, there's more. I had that problem one time because I'm not going to go there. All right. So anyway, the other video that I have coming out very shortly is I just got a pair of speakers in that that are brand new to the market. The company's very first set of bookshelf speakers. It's a company I've worked with before, but it's their first foray into the bookshelf speaker world. And I'm very curious. They're funny. I'm very curious to how well they are. And I got to say, I just opened up for the first time. Some of my patrons got to see that. I'm not gonna give it away. We just opened them up today. There's some really neat features on them that I'm interested about. I'm curious how well they're going to actually do. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I have not even listened to them yet. I've only opened one of them, actually. I haven't even opened the second one. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, first of all, for the super chats. And thank you, guys, for sponsoring us and just being here with us today. I hope that you learned some things, and I hope that you were a little bit entertained. All right,
and happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Elliot's the only one that fell for that. We'll see.
I'm just too trusting. What can I say?
You're too trusting.
Not anymore, though.
You've ruined Elliot Designs. All right, we'll see you guys.
All right, see you.